and welcome to another video from Charles Cox Group. So today we're going to be talking about LPE1s, so Landlords Purchase Enquiries 1, or is it 2 now? Who knows? We'll come on to that in a bit. So basically, what is an LPE1? Pretty much, that's probably why you found this video and you've searched for it either through YouTube or our own website. So who needs an LPE1 and what is the purpose of them? So the person purchasing it or their lenders may want to know a little bit about the property that they're purchasing. So they want to know if there are any major works coming up. They want to know how the freehold title's set up. They want to know if the person's in arrears or if they've paid up their balance for service charge and ground rent. They want to know if there are any disputes. There's a whole list of questions within this LPE1 form. So the first thing that happens is you as the buyer come along, say, oh, I love this flat, it's got fantastic views, whatever, you fall in love with it. You decide you want to purchase it. During that process, your solicitor will write to the current owner and say, please can you arrange for this LPE1 to be filled in. Now, you can't really fill it in yourself because obviously you could be quite biased towards the questions that are given, and we'll come on to that a bit later about why that would not be a good thing to do. So you would give it to your agent, somebody like ourselves, or possibly if you're self-managed, then the main director or an independent party. They would then fill it in and return that. There may be additional questions as the process goes along, because that form will then be sent back to the purchaser, the person trying to buy the property, for their solicitors to review and ultimately for them to review. So they might want to say things like, oh, I want to know a bit more about the major works. When are they going to be planned for? When are they coming up? How much are they going to cost? Do we know anything about that? They might have read the minutes from the last meeting that say, you know, the person on the ground floor owes a shed load of money and that's really stifling us being able to do repairs at the building. They might want to know more about that. So there may be further questions. Normally, there is a fee for filling those in, and some agents will offer kind of a fast track fee, which is obviously more expensive than say like a slow track one. Some agents will literally just tick the boxes and give hardly ever any information. So if they say, has there been any disputes, they might just say yes and that's it, and then leave you to ask the question what the disputes were. Other agents will fill in and do all of that information from day one. So we actually believe in giving all the information to start with, and then you've got everything to hand, because all that happens if you just tick the boxes is people come back with further questions normally, and then it's chargeable for that. Because they're additional questions. So some agents will lure people in with a sort of cheap fee and say, well, we'll do it for this, but then you don't really get the information. The information you require is really for your own benefit to make a decision as to want to continue with the purchase. Obviously, your solicitor will advise you accordingly as to any concerns they've got, but you may want other concerns. So, for example, quite often comes up if you've got a pet. So they might want to say the lease says that you can only have a pet if you've got consent. Well, I love my pet, so therefore I'm only going to purchase this property if the current freeholder or freehold company and agent and whatever the setup is willing to give me consent upon me buying this property. So I need something in writing, an undertaking to say that they won't unreasonably withhold consent. So the purpose of the form is really to give you that kind of insight into what's going on at the building. Once you've had that insight and you continue and you say, yes, I'd like to crack on with the purchase, you buy the property and so on. A few years down the line, something happens. It is entirely possible that somebody will go back to the LP1 and say, you said that we weren't doing any major works for 7 years. Here we are doing major works. So the answers you give have to be not wishy-washy or politician, but they kind of have to cover you for the future. And obviously it can be quite difficult because you may not have had your meetings or your AGMs or decided where you go. So you really have to think about the questions, because that you could have somebody come back and take you to task for saying something like there aren't any major works planned, there are no disputes, there is no Japanese knotweed, all those kind of things. And that's why you can't really fill in the form yourself as the owner of the flat, because obviously you would be quite biased. You could say, I don't owe any service charge money because I've literally just paid it all, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm only in dispute about the ground rent or whatever. Well, that's not quite technically the case, is it? Because you actually owe that money, regardless of whether you're in dispute of it or not. That's a different thing. Your account balance at that moment in time is in a debit. So on the basis you can be held liable for what you say in those forms, it is always best to really think about the answers that you're giving, not just tick the boxes and give any wishy-washy things, and just remember that people can come back to you. So hence why we would normally charge for it, any agent would, because it does take time. There is a lot of supporting documents, so copies of insurance policies, fire risk assessments, asbestos surveys, all those kind of things go into that pack. And realistically, that information, once you've given it, as long as it's watertight and it is correct and it's not hiding anything, then actually that is a true statement at that moment in time. The fact in 3 months' time you have a meeting and you decide you're going to do some major works, even though you said at that moment in time when you submitted that LPE1 there were no plans to do that, as long as that's documented correctly, that's fine. If the sale is still ongoing, you may have some duty of care to inform the solicitor and say, we've actually had a meeting, so the answer to question 7, for example, is different now. We have had a meeting and they have decided to do that. If it's a material change, that's obviously a duty of care, due diligence, that kind of stuff, and comes into these things. So, you know, at the end of the day, if you have a meeting, 2 weeks after they've completed the sale and things completely change, that is the danger of these things. But, purchasing leasehold property. But at the end of the day, you have to repair the building. So hopefully your surveyor would have picked up on those things and you may get some inkling. And well-managed buildings don't just have things out of the blue. They don't just suddenly decide to have a 5-year survey and they've got a load of money, that they need to spend on it and they're instantly going to spend it now. If it's well managed, it will all be planned out and timed on a kind of cyclical basis in line with the lease and any other repairs. So, worst case scenario, you find something untoward like a big crack in the building or something that's kind of come to light that perhaps isn't covered by insurance or whatever. But you could have the same thing with a house. So. So hopefully that's really useful information as to what an LPE1 is and exactly what it entails. Now, there is some new legislation coming out about LPE1-2s and various other acronyms to do with unadopted roads, properties that isn't really leasehold, but they still have service charge applied to them. And those particular questions within the LPE1 will vary and differ depending on different sites, different setups and so on. So they'll be much more bespoke. Obviously, you've got some sites that employ people and they have gyms and swimming pools underneath and multiple lifts and all that sort of stuff. Other sites are quite basic. They're only a block of 6 with just a communal hallway and a grounds. So those forms are much more catered towards those things. Anyway, if you've got any questions, please do comment below, stick them in there, and that's probably the best place to do them. You can ping us an email. Obviously you can go on our website and look at us, and obviously if you do need any advice or perhaps you need some management on your building or whatever, then please do get in touch. But in terms of for comments directly on this video, if you could post them below, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Hopefully you find these content videos quite useful, and with that said, I shall see you next time.